And this meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Fantastic. Land of YouTube. Hey, hey, hey. It's great to be with you today with some of our fabulous friends. Jordy Lishman here.
Hello.
And a few other fantastic friends too. Daryl M. Margarita, thank you for joining in this evening. Oh, meeting is being live streamed. Sorry, we just gotta get it paused out there. Brenda's coming back in, so this is fantastic. We're just going to keep it a bit of a closed container this evening, but we will be able to see the comments over on YouTube. I just need to change it so it's not made for kids, and that means that you can engage, because who knew kids weren't allowed to actually be part of the conversation unless it was of the old adage, speak and or listen and don't be heard. What's that adage?
Children should be seen and not heard.
There we are. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to share this right in the chat group here. If you guys want, where's the chat? Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So this is where friends of yours will be able to tune in. If anyone wants to share that link, please do. And then what I'm going to do is actually kind of just dive into the purpose of this evening, which is to unpack the CIA Gateway Process Report. This was a report which basically was 20 years, from my understanding, where people were put to the absolute limits of what they could take to see that we are actually the center point. So the point between the black and white holes, which is why when I had my awakening experience, I saw it as the fight between the fearful and faithful, and how it was the gray ones, as I was referring to what I was seeing energetically in a pattern, as the ones most easily manipulated by the dark side, as I was calling it. And last night we were actually driving and we were looking up the definition of gray matter, white matter, and black matter. And so this is an angle that I'm bringing in, and a perspective that I kind of saw in my own mind's eye when I was going through all of my stuff. And I hadn't made the full connection between the gray matter in the mind, which I feel is part of all of this. And there are others that know a lot more about all of this, but I do believe that when we come together in community of common unity to talk about what has already come before that could be used for good or evil, which is lived backwards. Well, the devil is lived backwards, evil and live are backwards and frontwards, the anagram with that. So that's the intention for this evening. And so I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to participate in a conversation about what is important in terms of how we can kind of move forward and not have to start from scratch, but we can use a foundation that already exists and talk about what's been and then what's going to be, because we chose to step up as the leaders of our own realms, and then we became the change we seek within the greater whole. So without any further delay, unless there's anything anyone else would like to say, I'm gonna just start sharing my screen so that did it end up recording? It did not. Let's do that. Perfect. Okay, so now that we're doing that, we're going to flip over to the screen where we will be able to live stream the share. And so I'm just going to make it so I can see both of our comments. Okay, wait a second, sorry. The positioning on a one-screen device is not always most convenient or nice, but we get there and we do the best we can with what we've got, and then we do better when we can do better. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so I wanted to show you where you can find this. You just look it up, Google search. It's not hard to do, but ultimately you'll see that it actually is a government website. So CIA unpacked.gov is where you will find this analysis. So it is not some hokey woo-woo crazy talk. It's very legitimately right there for us to see, because that's how predictive programming, aka black magic, works. So I'm just making it so we can see everything that we need to. So if any comments come in within this Zoom meeting, then we'll privately be able to see that, and we'll bring it into the meeting as well. And then if anyone has anything you want to interject, if we can just wait until the end of a paragraph, so then we can kind of take out the read and also have the conversation too. I think that would indeed be a great way to move forward. Do you have anything you wanted to say before we kick off?
Let's get at her.
Woo!
Let's open that gateway.
Woo, and very carefully to do that and know what we want to welcome into. Subject, analysis and assessment of gateway process. I'm imagining we're going to get through about 9 pages. There's 29 total. And ultimately, this was the transcription of about 20 years of, like I said, pushing people to their limits to be able to come to these conclusions. 1, you tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially, based on conversations with a physician who took the gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Isaac Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. I then found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by physics. Once this was done, I got ahead of myself. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it in a framework of reference suited to objective assessment. 2, I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomedical factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation so that their objectives and mode of functioning could be compared in the reader's mind with the Gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of the paper. I indicate that at times these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the Gateway experience. Niels Bohr, 3. Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the abstruse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique. 4, Paradoxically, having gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame of reference, in the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the gateway experience in common belief systems. I did so because although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt that it was necessary, after having completed the analysis, to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true. 5. This study is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of its basic structure and the fundamental concepts upon which it is based will make it a useful guide for other USANESCON personnel who are required to take the gateway training or work with gateway materials. So that is a corporation I'm not familiar with. USANESCON, what's that?
USA.
Anybody familiar? Pamela, awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining in tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Perfect. So that was by Wayne McDonnell, Commander, and all of his accolades I'm not familiar with.
Me neither.
You are not either.
It's interesting to hear that these people are taking this very seriously.
Well, people's lives were ended and terminated because they were literally pushed over the edge, because they were put onto psychedelic drugs to the point where they didn't come back from beyond the beyond, because that's where oftentimes we go when we pierce through that veil of illusions between reality as we see it to be and then the reality that we see it to be when we tune into the multi-dimensional component of what is literal, but then energetic, mythic, and symbolic, all happening simultaneously on top of one another too, I would say. But yeah, so thank you all. And yeah, feel free to use the chat as well if you wanted to chat in between anybody. I saw a hand movement and I wasn't sure whether that was somebody trying to catch attention. I think, Daryl, I saw your hand going.
No, I was just gonna say hi, Pamela.
Oh,
also,
beautiful.
I'm not sure what the etiquette is here, but so like if you're going through this and I want to interject or make a comment, am I allowed to, or you just want to go through like the chat?
Yeah, if you want to just even mention in the chat that you've got something to add, then we can flip over and have the conversation once I finish the paragraph that I'm reading. So that way we can have conversation. And then, but if you let me know that you've got something to say in the chat, or you raise your hand using the buttons at the bottom of the screen there. I think it's under the more button. I can't remember. I don't know what yours looks like, but if you just raise your hand or you make a comment in the chat, then I'll know that, and then we can have the conversation, which is the benefit of showing up live. You can have your questions answered. And then for those of you who are being able to watch this live too, oh, I guess that was not what I was trying to do. And then that won't go up. Come on. You know how it kind of just changes things for you. All right, we're gonna get back to the report. And perfect. All right, I look forward to this. Woo! Thank you for doing this with me, because I feel like this is a super significant report. So I appreciate all of you. The Gateway Experience, Brain Hemisphere Synchronization in Perspective. 1, Introduction. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the Gateway Experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization or hemisync, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what Gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the Gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset, which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand gateway by comparison as we proceed. 2. Hypnosis. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Ishtak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers and lower cerebral emotional portions and associated pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, verbal and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. Consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli, to include hypnotic suggestions, are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere where they are accepted and acted upon directly. The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region, sensory motor responses requiring involvement of the cortex, and so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as homunculus, which corresponds to points in the body. See Exhibit 1, next page. Stimulation of the corresponding area in the cortex causes intermediate response in the associated portion of the body. Consequently, induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb, if it reaches the right hemisphere unchallenged and is referred to the appropriate area of the sensory cortex, will result in an electrical reaction being generated that will induce the feeling of numbness. Similarly, the suggestion that the person is experiencing a general feeling of happiness and well-being would be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggested feeling of euphoria. Finally, suggestions, such as one that informs the hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory, would be responded to in the right hemisphere by assessing unused information, storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result of left hemisphere selection and control processes. This aspect will become significant in the context of the Great Way process, when attention is given to examining the way that hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the Gateway experience. 3. Transcendental meditation. So this was the diagram. These were the diagrams that were mentioned. Exhibit A. So this is Exhibit A right here, from Stalking the Wild Pendulum. So figure A, B, and C. A is the homunculus. So the human, it's hard to make out.
Cerebral cortex.
Cerebral cortex?
Yeah.
There we go, yes. The stimulus loop and the gray matter, the white matter is out here. And then the third and lateral. Maybe the third and lateral ventricles, and then the pleasure contours. Like life and tongue. Oh, that would make sense. The life and tongue. So this is the brain, and then the description of the homunculus, and then the lateral view of this same experience. The motor and sensory cortex, and the third and lateral ventricles. So if you can maybe spend some more time looking at this if it appeals to you, a view of the third and lateral ventricles in context of associated brain structure. So this is the structure of the brain.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to go on to number 3. So transcendental meditation. On the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctly different fashion. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration on the process of drawing energy up the spinal cord ultimately results in what appears to be creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral cortex on the right side of the brain. As a result, according to Bentov, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting with the toes and on up. The Bentov biomedical model, as described in a book by Lee Sanella, MD, entitled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence, states that the standing acoustical waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. In addition, according to Bentov, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Bentov also notes that most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body, means that it is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years, or some is required to bring up the Kundalini, Bentov states that exposure to mechanical and acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz cycles per second for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. Bentov cites as an example repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibrations, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. He also says that the accumulation effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system. Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like this was kind of what I was going through when I went through what I did. What were you thinking?
It's just fascinating over how they are trying to describe this process and how they feel like this particular hertz of acoustic resonance in the ventricles is causing some kind of out-of-body experiences like this.
Yeah, and something else that I wanted to mention as to why we were doing this together as well is you have the German New Medicine perspective to bring in.
Yeah, and it really turns upside down a lot of medical understandings. Like he was saying about hypnotism, entering first the left part of the brain and then going to the right part of the brain. And the left part of the brain being the analytical side and the right part of the brain being more creative or something like this, right? So we have very similar kind of concept with sound and audio digestion, because we talk about 3 basic levels of the brain, which would be the pons of the brainstem, where the digestive relays are. Then above that would be the cerebral cortex. It's where all of the relays for the glandular systems are. And then the cerebral cortex, I believe, is where the motor systems are, or the last level of the brain. But in the digestive system, there is an audio relay because it's a very primal sense. There's also a visual relay. There's also relays for your lungs as well as your digestive system. But whenever you have an audio morsel, we call it at that point, because there's another advanced set of audio relays that I may be talking about. The audio morsel comes into the right ear, comes into the left ear, which is controlled by the right brain. And then it comes into the right ear and goes out the left. Comes into the right ear, which is controlled by the left brain, which is what they're talking about. And then it's digested in the left brain, which is where it's processed. So this is very similar to what they're talking about and I've always wondered about hypnotism, and certain people can be hypnotized. Not everyone can. You have to be very open for susceptibility, but it's like being able to talk to their subconscious directly. And of course, all the keys to these magical powers of being able to leave the body and to experience other realms and everything like this are all coming from that kind of ability to open up the mind.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, from the subconscious, right? From the ability to access the subconscious. Like, we can all do this, but we can't just go, I'm going to do it right now, because we have to be able to interact with the subconscious in the right way. So what they in the German New Medicine would call all these kinds of abilities is caused by a double flying conflict, or a double flying constellation, I should say, where there's basically two constellations or active parts of the brain which are on both sides of the head. And when that becomes active, then you can basically go into that, what they're calling space-time situation, where you can go ahead in time, back in time, or anywhere parallel to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pamela is saying it's so interesting, and so much like meditation, it flows easily with other things. So absolutely. Yeah. Like, if we understand the tools that are available to us, then we can see how the modalities that we've already been using kind of tie into that which other people are accessing. Because it's like, throughout all of this whole con video game, as I refer to it, it's just like we've all been divided by the words, which are the boxes that we put energy into, and then we think that that's different when it's just a different packaging of energy ultimately. So I wanted to just give everybody an opportunity. If anybody else has anything did you have anything else you wanted to say there?
I was going to say that according to them, according to German medicine, this ability to leave your body and to go see other places and to travel in time is all about finding a way above your traumas and to find a new way. And essentially, it happens when you are under duress. Like, there are different levels of stress. So there, like, one level causes one lesion, and then another trauma causes the next lesion. And then that gives you the ability to go out of your mind to find a way out of these problems. This is why they say it happens.
Wow, I feel like I lived that with what I went through, and I'm sure many of us can relate to that. Margarita, I see the smile. I love it. We'll dig back in, and very much appreciate that and the opportunity to bring that perspective in, because from what I've learned in the last month and a half, 2 months about German New Medicine is just like everything that I've been coming to in my own experiences, largely it's tying into what you've brought to the table to kind of offer the perspective of. So it's very interesting. And then to have this opportunity, and then to have the perspectives that each of those who are in the room today are bringing to the table, and then everyone else who may watch the replay and then share in the comments as well. Em says, Jordy, that makes a lot of sense. So that's resonating. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Okay, 4, biofeedback. The third consciousness altering methodology, which will be briefly described, is biofeedback. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral, motor, and sensory cortices, and disordered pain or pleasure centers. Instead of suppressing the left hemisphere, as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing or ignoring it, as is done in transcendental meditation, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure, or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Special self-monitoring devices such as the digital thermometer are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. In this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that left brain consciousness is enabled to access appropriate areas in the right brain using a conscious demand mode. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. At that point, the subject can mentally, left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved and can begin to emphasize by memory recall the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. In this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated, and a variety of specific physiological results may be achieved. In addition, biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave pattern on a cathode ray tube has proven to be a laboratory-validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in profoundly relaxed states characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation. Gateway and hemisync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and/or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what the technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres, so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is its use of the hemisync technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Jagger as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. Although hemisync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, Melissa Jagger states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain hemisync with the institution's basic focus 3 tapes. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish hemisync at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Twomlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured, as with a light bulb, in watts, into a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. Dr. Twomlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. 6. Lamp versus laser. Melissa Jagger uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of hemisync in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind in its natural state may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind, under the discipline of hemisync, acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both so that the human mind is soon resonating at ever higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and oral perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. 7. Frequency following response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency following response, FFR, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to the theta level. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist, as the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, hemisync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them, the beat frequency, thus availing itself of the FFR phenomenon and using the technique of beat frequencies. The gateway system uses hemisync and other audio techniques employing the FFR phenomenon to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at a virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of ever higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions of Bob Monroe accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds, such as sea surf, to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes, so as to access via intuitive means new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness.
So they're using frequencies which are below our audio spectrum, and just below, and they're using two of them, and somehow we just can hear the difference. That's how they're doing it.
Well, this is how we get dysregulated when the frequencies being used within the music industry, for instance, are set to 440 hertz, which is destructive because the body's constantly having to adjust with every single note, which means we're having to work, which means we're not able to actually be settled in the moment where we could actually ride a harmonious 9 note, which is like the 432 or the 528 hertz.
Have you heard of James T. Hart, the biocybin fellow? He's done a lot of work with biofeedback meditation, and basically he's in agreement that all of this kind of access to the Akashic records happens through theta wave, during your theta wave. Whereas you can do out of body experiences and high level alpha waves, but you'll only go to heavenly places and angelic beings. But that's what you're kind of, it's what meditation you should be kind of focusing on, is alpha wave meditation. But for this kind of stuff to travel into different realms, theta is generally what the brain goes into. And it's not really a sleep state. They say that it's sleep, associated with sleep, but it's about the transfer to sleep. So you go through theta on the way to REM. That's where all the weird magic happens.
Yeah. So alpha, theta, beta, delta, but not in that order.
Yeah, alpha's at the top. Alpha, beta.
Alpha is why we have an alphabet. Which alpha are you going to bet on?
Mhm.
And then beta's underneath of the alphabet. I mean, in the alpha state.
As I understand it, alpha is like pure bliss and happiness, and it's actually very wholesome when you're in that alpha state. And beta is like fight or flight.
Mhm.
Theta is access to the Akashic records, and then delta is your ability to influence others. Like, these are not the droids you're looking for. You have really strong delta waves. People will be easily hypnotized by you. You have that edge on people.
Wow. M says, so the 5G technology will be used to alter people?
Probably.
Well, there's a lot to be said around that. And this might not be the
And
call specifically for
5G
that.
isn't an audio signal. It's in a electromagnetic spectrum, but we don't really know what that does to us either on these levels. So we should really be doing a lot more research on that to know. But the powers that be don't want you to look there. So
It's true. It is EMF. Yes, exactly. And what I know for sure is that at least one man or woman on this call has a lot of insight to offer. And there's more than one, but I know of one that I'm just allowing it to be as it is tonight. But I know that we have access to insights through those who have been going deeper beyond what those who don't wish for us to know these things would wish for us to do, and for a long time too. So soon that will be available, hopefully, for us to be able to not just consume, but to actually do the next steps there. But you were going to say?
well, I definitely believe in this gateway process on some levels, but I'm also very skeptical as to why they released it to us and why we get to read it. And if we've had it for 20 years and no one's really taken advantage of it in a way that is very obvious, that everybody knows about. Oh, that's what you do to do this. I don't know. I'm like, is this like a red herring? Are we getting thrown off by reading this, or is this what they actually?
A red herring.
Mhm.
I've never heard that expression.
Well, it's kind of a decoy.
A red herring is a decoy.
I think that's what it is. Where
Interesting.
they're like, basically they say they've given you the answer. Here it is. It's not really the answer. So
Right.
you think you understand it, and you try to pursue that, but nothing happens.
Fair. Well, I can't speak into this specifically, but what I do know is that black magic and predictive programming only work if the victim was informed.
Right.
And if they sent the joker in to tell the joke that was actually what the intention
Right.
was.
So a lot of people say that informing comes through different things like movies and stuff like this, where they're really giving you the hints, but they don't actually tell you. But to come out with a CIA document saying this is actually how it's done, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no.
But how else are you going to train your staff? Like
Yeah.
for all the alphabet agencies.
Well, that's the thing, that like they put it in subtle ways as opposed to saying it in direct ways. So, I don't know, but maybe they don't. Maybe this is the right thing. This is like what you said. They have to actually give us the answer, so they just release it in a document that nobody knows.
Yeah, well, that's oftentimes if you can create the distraction over on the side. Margarita, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I do. Thanks. Couple things. Yeah, just with your point, with you're just saying there too, right? It's like the karma. They have to let us know what they're doing. I don't know if when you're on number 6, if they are like, I don't know if you've read this whole thing or not, but there is something about, when grace descends and raises your consciousness that way and, expands your reality. So I wonder if they have even considered that.
I read this report about 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years ago. And it's like I read the whole thing, and that was, or I guess it was just shortly after the time when I got locked up, and like my whole world got flipped upside down, and then I was trying to put it all into perspective. And then I was also probably coming at it from the perspective of the victim that had just been really scared. And so I was looking at it from that perspective and that lens. And so I wanted to come back to it now because I've had time to incorporate my experiences to move my scared art victim into more of a sacred side of that same archetypal pattern, which is how we become victorious. And so I can't answer the question because I don't remember, which is why I wanted to go back over it, but do it at a time when, as I'm reading it, others can listen and then not have to feel daunted by a 29-page report, which might not seem a lot, but the fact it's got those 3 letters of the CIA makes somehow us feel sometimes like we can't get through it all, because that must be what super smart people read. Or, there's
definitely some confusing literature in here, like the whole, if you're using your right brain and your left leg is going to go numb and you can slightly see a temperature difference if you're meditating in the right way. This is how you test it. I mean, all that stuff kind of went over my head. How do I set up that experiment again?
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. So confuse them, you lose them. And that's exactly how you diffuse the whole situation, where the truth is right there for us all to see, but then you put in so much complexity that you say, F it, let's go be.
I do like the Monroe Institute and what they've been touting.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's really sometimes that cognitive dissonance, when you can actually say something right to someone, but with their filters, they can't hear it, they can't see it, and it's like right there.
Well, it's all frequency. And that was the realization last year for me, and especially within the last 6+ months. But if we are trying to give people information, their nervous system doesn't feel settled enough to receive, it's not going to resonate. And we're going to become the ones that are the threat, that their cognitive dissonance is going to try to cast out, because no longer are we the friend. Now we're the enemy that's trying to jeopardize a reality that they can't sacrifice or let go. So we are not needing to share information, because that's not what's going to allow their nervous system to have an example as to how to settle themselves, which is why self-regulation is the key to all of this. We need to know how to actually do this for ourselves instead of looking to the external entrainment technology. And, I'm really grateful I got involved with a neuroentrainment technology back when all of my craziness was going on. And it was the first time I'd been exposed to like 5G technology and neuroentrainment technology and subliminal messages and lights in the visors and the ears. And basically I had a mentor that I am very, very grateful and guide, that basically said, okay, like if you're looking to an external source to help you on the internal, you're allowing outside in. And I just did an interview this last week and on that channel on Odyssey. And basically they showed a video of is it a poltergeist, where it's somebody's been overtaken by an entity or a spirit, and basically the demon was speaking to the priest, and it was, there was that whole cultish element of the freakiness and all of that. But what the entity or the demon speaking through this girl was saying is that we just need a door, just a door. And then it's just like, but the door is in our consciousness. You just need a door. You just need to open the door to let somebody else's programming into you when you are most susceptible, and you're already open, and then you're using somebody else's program to just help you get to that deeper level, and you have no idea what else they've put in their program. That's dangerous.
Definitely bad advice, I think.
There's adding vice, a lot of it for sure. Margarita, your hand's still up. So if you want to say anything else, by all means, otherwise we'll get back down into number 7, but thank you for that. Bringing the element of cognitive dissonance in is absolutely huge. You're complete or frozen? Okay, perfect. All right, awesome. So we'll dig back in, and the intention tonight as well, by the way, just FYI, is to go until 10 o'clock. So it's an hour and a half. But the intention is really just kind of getting through more conversation, but maybe I was thinking we get through 9 pages and we're blasting through pretty fast. So an hour and a half was kind of the time frame that we're thinking as we get to the 9:30 mark.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll carry on. 7, frequency following response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as frequency following response, FFR, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency, did we just read this? Was that the part? That was the part. Okay.
Yeah, we did read 7.
Yeah. Okay. My apologies. Okay. So we're on to 8. 8, role of resonance. However, brain coherence through entrainment to beat frequencies introduced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentov, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the biopurification. I've heard of biopurification, but the bifurcation. The bifurcation echo. I've never heard that word. Okay. So what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. Bentov describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. When the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks in two to go into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood and a new pressure pulse is traveling down, these 2 pressure points will eventually collide somewhere along the aorta and produce an interference pattern. By placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. The result is a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound which echoes throughout the body and rises up into the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, that when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it is operating normally. 9, brain stimulation. Bentov's biomedical model shows that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. The resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brainstem. An electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Just as Dr. Twemlow observed in his research on the effects of the hemisync tapes, also the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is, in turn, cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located between it and the skull. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down the brain. It sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.01 millimeters in a continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in a range between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7 to 7.5 hertz. Of this process, Bentov states, this is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers, or just about the perimeter of the planet. In other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Such a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over long distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. Consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm within the nervous system and to significantly lower blood pressure to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. The resulting resonance sets up a regular repetitive sound wave which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of the Earth. And Earth and heart are the same letters in a different order. Just to remember the fact that we have our own natural rhythm, and then the earth does too. And when we wear plastic soles on the bottom of our feet and we walk on our soles all day and we forget how wholesome life truly is because the soles are what we walk on, that's when we see the inverted reality that we're living in at an even more obvious way. And I heard it was actually, there's that song about putting the diamonds on the soles of the feet, and it actually had to do with the enhanced frequencies of transmission through the crystals that were actually gifted to the one that had the diamonds in their shoe. So I asked about that and I got my answer, so I thought I'd just pass it on.
Okay. Paul Simon.
Paul Simon, yes, it's the song.
I thought that was about being too rich.
Oh, really?
That's what the song was.
Oh, okay. Well, I have no idea, but
She was so rich, she had diamonds in the soles of her shoes, just for fun.
well, shamans had that too, though, is the history of that. There's a culture where they actually had the diamonds in the shoes because it was about the connection with the earth, evidently. And then there's also the element of, being so rich that you got your toilets made of gold or you got diamonds in your shoes, however it works. But yeah. So here we go. All right. 10, energy entrainment. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now in training because of its ability to resonate with it. This puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steadily higher levels of frequency and amplitude, so as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection, also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said about this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. And I thought it was so fascinating because as it was just talking about the electromagnetic sphere, there was literally a drop from the top of the water bottle into the water, and then it was the ripples, and it just felt very reflective of the fact that we are in this electromagnetic universe. And Junvalu Melchizedek has a really powerful book called Living in the Heart, where he talks about the toroidal field of each of us and then the earth as a whole too. So I just bring that resource into. Pamela, are you heading out or?
No,
You
I
wanna
wanted to
say
say,
something?
I want to say something. Can I say something?
Please.
So I don't know if it's just me tripping out right now, but I feel like this is, like a language that doesn't come from us. It's something that knows everything about our bodies, and it's impossible that it comes from a man. Like, this report came from somewhere that's not from this earth.
I was going to make a joke and be like, clearly it came from a woman. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Like, that's just what I'm feeling. I just wanted to share that.
I wonder how they came to all these conclusions. That's for sure.
As
Yeah.
I'm reading it, I'm feeling the with obviously, well, we've all practiced English for as long as what we've been using the language, but you know, I have done a lot of reading, but like a lot of these words are tripping me up to an extent, or when I get to them, it's just like, oh God, I'm glad I got through that, you know, as I'm reading it, if I'm honest, and kind of like the unconscious conversation that goes through the head when you're reading something publicly. But then it's just, I also remember how heavy this is to be reading on your own, and then why so many people are put off and then moving out of it. And it does feel like a different language because it's foreign to us. We don't speak like this. This is not our common vernacular.
Even like the scientific.
No, but it's not really what I'm aiming to express. It's not the language that's being used. It's what they're describing.
Well, yeah,
It's what they're describing about the human body and how it functions and all of these things. It's so intricate that it sounds like it's beyond something that like could be explained by a human. I don't know. Like it's
either
and
like
again it's
incredibly
not
intelligent. It's either incredibly intelligent or it's just buffoonery, because a lot of it doesn't seem to make a ton of sense, but maybe it's because it's beyond us. Like you're saying, maybe it's like an alien origin or a higher consciousness. But like one of the things they said in here is that your body will make a sound resonance that will travel along with the magnetic fields of the earth. And I'm like, well, these are two different mediums. How's that work? I can read one line in here. I have like a million questions that no one's going to answer. So I don't know what to do.
All right.
Well, no one of us are as smart as all of us when joined together. So thank you for sharing that. Was there anything else that you wanted to contribute? Nope. Thank you. That's
Thanks.
awesome. Perfect. Margarita, was there something you wanted to say? I saw you came back on your video.
No, but I'm going to tell you that I'm putting my tourmaline and my smoky quartz under my feet right now.
Amazing. Black tourmaline is very protective and grounding, and the smoky quartz is very clearing as well. And so you got some good tools there.
Diamonds on the soles of your shoes.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Who needs diamonds when we can use all kinds of gemstones and crystals and get the benefits from those? And if you've never seen a crystal Bible before, without that being a religious connotation, it's just the Bible has the definition of all of the stones, and it's a really useful tool. So I know anybody that is into crystals is probably aware of that, but anyone that might want to get into crystals, a crystal Bible is a really useful tool to learn more about some of the spiritual elements or the energetic elements to smoky quartz and tourmaline or any of the other crystals that you may feel drawn to or resonate with. So we'll dig back in. Daryl, was there anything you wanted to share while we're contributing? Or Em as well? But Daryl?
No, no, I'm okay. I think, Pamela, what you're asking is, a long time ago, there were scientists, men, who were doing a lot of crazy stuff, and we don't know what they're doing, right? So it's like the Frankenstein. So man used to do a lot of things to animals to try to figure out what's happening to inside of us to explain. And man is pretty amazing because he's dissected and somehow determined all this. So it sounds like it's made up, but it's not. There are very ingenious people that figure this out. And we have to remember that that man is actually God, is a physical form of expressing what God actually already knows, right? So if you're always constantly thinking with your intellectual mind, it will not make sense. So truth and stuff is rarely determined through your intellectual, rational mind. It's actually through spiritual insight. So we've gotten to the stage now whereby we've cultivated the intellect too much, and we've gone. So somehow, men are always impressed and proud of the things we know ourselves in the back, and we constantly put labels and explanation on things in order to make ourselves look intelligent. But the fact is, you don't have the intelligence to know those things completely because we did not create them. We're not God when we're thinking from a human perspective. But when you tap into that God frequency, then a lot of this stuff will kind of make sense. But you see, when you're delving into this stuff, you're actually doing the same thing as the dark forces are doing. They're constantly dissecting and dissecting and dissecting. And you can dissect forever. But when you do that, you're actually increasing the separation of yourself from the source, which is actually part of the problem, right? But you have to say it that way. You have to grasp this concept of oneness, which is the same thing, synonymous with talking about God. Anyways, I'm a bit rambling. I don't know if it makes any sense what I'm saying, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that contribution, and we are individuated expressions of the grand overall creator experiencing itself through us from my perspective. And so to be able to really understand how things are being used against us and when input is useful compared to when the input is creating a noisy mind that's keeping us out of our heart, where we're actually able to feel truth, because truth is resonant. Truth has a frequency. And there's a lot of tools that can be used for good in order to enhance that frequency, or tools that can be used to harvest the energy of others, whose frequency then tries to attune itself to the frequency in its midst, which, if what this is saying means that we're naturally being set up to be unbalanced and then have to balance at an unbalanced state in order to balance those two frequencies that were placed at different levels to create that hemisync experience, then we're being basically harmonized or disharmonized. Because we're being set into a dysregulated state simply because we're trying to balance and match ourselves to a dysfunctional reality, which is really what the mainstream media is all about. Like, the mainstream is poisoned, and we know that. But when we're trying to self-regulate and as vibrational beings, we're trying to match that which is in our environment, and it's the frequency we're trying to match. That's why the information's not where it's at. It's like when we go beyond the information, we go into the feeling center. It's just like, I like how you feel. You feel good to me. I want to be with you because you feel good to me. But like, if you didn't feel good to me, I wouldn't want to be with you. Right. So it's just like, these are the things that when we vibrationally feel into truth, it's not what is spoken, it's just what is felt. And then we can kind of go into the feeling space, which is not where the power, that's where our power is, in our feelings, and beneath those in the emotions, because our feelings are the interpretation of the energies in motion in our midst. But when we actually are able to go into that, we can call back more of our soul fragments that were lost when we left parts of ourselves. This is all my BS, take it, leave it, work with it. But basically, when we left aspects of ourselves in a not now moment, and then we have them coming back to us, it will be through the energies in motion that they will return to us, and they won't feel really well accepted if they didn't feel accepted when they got rejected in the first place and left out, and then coming back home. So it's a different concept in a way, but it is related, because ultimately, all of these theories keep us trapped in the mind trap of the head, where we're out of our heart, and which is out of alignment with the moment.
Well, I think it's a dance between the two. I mean, my BS is that we have like the left side of the brain, which is the analytical, and then the right side of the brain, which is, they say, the creative. But I see it as the male and the female. And the male side sees time in linear fashion, one step ahead of each other, and that's logical. But the female side, with the creative side, it sees the end goal. It sees, like, it comes from the other direction of time, non-linear time. And so it's why it's so wild and creative, they say. But we kind of merge the two of them to move forwards here on the earth. But I like what the natives say, or what they call the hollow bones, is when you are open enough and you're trusting enough, and you've consumed enough rational information, and you've opened yourself up to enough irrational information that you're moving through spirit and in flow. And that's when you're containing more, you're letting the spirit move through. That's why they call it hollow bones. Like the eagles have hollow bones and they can fly. So when you have your hollow bones, you're no longer just using logic, you're not just using woo-woo, you're blending the two in a lovely way that makes the feelings and the vibrations good.
Beautiful. I love that. And the fact that literally today I was looking up Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, Women Who Run with Wolves, which is a fantastic work you can listen to on audio through even YouTube. And basically the first chapter in it was actually something about the old bones or the hollow bones. So I read that today, and then you say that now. So if you're interested in the wild woman archetype, which is basically the liberated, free aspect of us that is able to fly, compared to the constrained alternative to that, which is the scared side of the wild woman that becomes pretty dangerous when backed into a corner too, right? So I think we're going to read up till 12. So we'll just read 11 and 12, and then we'll come back and read the rest in a week or so. We'll schedule that on to meet up and get through the rest of the report. So we can work through that. Is there anything you wanted to add in before we go back, or anyone else?
Let's dive in.
Okay. 11, consciousness and energy. Before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate the two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Isaac Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 times 22 hertz, 10 times the power of 22 hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the power 15 hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the power of 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 times the power of 3 hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph, which we'll read as the final part to lead us into a phenomenal, not weak, because we don't want to have the A in the weakness. We want it to be strong like we are. Woo! Okay, so here we go. 12, holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward toward the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Dennis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Prize for his work. I wonder if he's related to Gabor Mate, and then I realized that the Gabor and the Mate are different orders. So no, but that was what came to my mind as I read his name. Maybe, who knows? Good point. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following invention of the laser. As biologist Lael Watson explains, the purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When two laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. Wow.
Very interesting how they make holograms. Eh? Fascinating.
Right? So we're going to wrap this reading up for this night. And there's the part of me that just wants to just like keep going. Oh, and it's not even that much more. Well, and then there is so much more after that. So we're going to have to come back, and then we'll be able to get into the absolute in infinity and the law of polarity, to be able to see how when we learn to self-regulate, then we're actually able to experience an enhanced experience of life generally. But all of these can be found if you want to read it. In the meantime, we got ourselves up to number 13, which
Lucky number 13.
is a lucky number indeed. So, whew, that will be the end of the reading piece. We're going to have a little offline conversation just to wrap up for those who are listening to the live stream to YouTube. When we come back, I will be posting when that in fact is happening. So if you're listening to this one, then you'll be set for the next one. It will be under Peaceful Inner Warriors United on Meetup. And so we'll look forward to having you with us then. Thank you everyone in view and others too who joined in along the way. And to